Hi there, this is Solitaire Ronin from Solitaire Ronin Films, and welcome to the final part of my 7-part director series. Thank you for watching the other episodes if you have, and if you haven't, they're all available. This one I think is one of the easier ones, and this is next level directors. So for me, next level directors are filmmakers who either have multiple masterpieces or are highly influential or changed the game of cinema. Some of them are all three. But these are directors that, for me, have at least 5 masterpieces. Because we all know and appreciate how difficult it is to make a good film, let alone a great film, let alone a masterpiece. So these guys, in my opinion, have made multiple masterpieces. Some filmmakers make films for 30 years and never make a great film, let alone a film that's just about perfect. So as always, please give me your lists of your next level directors. Again, there will be people that I've maybe forgotten, or if they're not on this list, either I don't rate them as next level directors, or I simply haven't been exposed to as much of their films. So if you check out my under review section, there will be directors like Ozu who people would have in the next level. But I just haven't seen enough of his films to make that judgment. So once I've wrapped part 7 up, I'm hoping next week to do a rough top 25 directors, and then I'll leave that until I've cleared my backlog, which should be sometime in the next century. And then do another top 25 maybe next year, roughly about the same time, and we'll see how it's changed. So let's just start from the top. They're not in any order, but I thought we might as well just start with the boss, and that's Akira Kurosawa, who is my favourite film director of all time, and also I think he's the best filmmaker of all time. This is the Criterion DVD of Throne of Blood, and it's spine 190 for all those interested in spine numbers. I can't remember the first time I saw a Kurosawa film. I think it might have been Yojimbo, and I was absolutely blown away by the framing, the shot composition, the tone, the action, the humour. And then I saw Seven Samurai, which is one of those films that is a desert island disc of films. Again, I'm not going to go into desert island disc of films, but if you only had like 10 films to choose from to take to a desert island, for me, Seven Samurai would definitely be one of them. In cinema, especially action cinema, the death of characters is just kind of glossed over, and people are expendable, but Seven Samurai is just so good that when characters die, you're genuinely annoyed about it and upset about it. So that when the rookie samurai is on his knees in the rain after the battle, distraught, we kind of feel the same way. The reason Kurosawa is next level is the number of masterpieces he made. We can all argue about which ones are which, but the fact he did different genres of films, he did contemporary as well as Jidaeki and historical ones. But for me, the thing that sets him apart, there's other directors on this list whose shot composition is breathtaking. The framing of characters in the frames is amazing. But for me, Kurosawa is the best. You can literally take any Kurosawa film, pause any frame, print it and stick it in an art gallery. His placing of characters within the frame and their relationship to each other is just unparalleled. If you watch something like High and Low, which the first half is essentially in a room with characters just moving about within that room and their relationship to each other, it's breathtaking. So for me, that's one of the many reasons why Kurosawa is next level. Yes, he's accused of being the most westernized Japanese master director. So in Japan, he's maybe not as popular. Certainly, in the 60s and 70s, people like Oshima kind of distanced themselves from Kurosawa as being kind of the old school. But for me, he's a master storyteller. He's a master at shot composition. And there's not much of a surprise that people called him sensei a lot. So the next one out of, I think it's 13 directors, is Stanley Kubrick. It's funny, there's a few directors on this list that didn't actually make that many films. Kubrick is next level because of the masterpieces he made. And again, his shot composition and framing is probably second to Kurosawa. But one of the things that makes Kubrick next level is the fact that he did kind of had a hand in inventing things. How much was actually Kubrick and how much was Kubrick getting the right people is debatable. But things like Steadicam, things like for shooting in natural light in Barry Lyndon with candlelight, they essentially created special lenses to be able to do it. Kubrick could arguably be the greatest technical director of all time. The scene in 2001 with a guy jogging round the circle, I know how that was done because they built it, but every time I see that film I'm still gobsmacked by it. It's just, his films are awe-inspiring. He doesn't necessarily give answers, but again, strangely enough, that's also a feature of quite a lot of next level directors. Life doesn't have answers, so why should art have answers? One thing that I'll mention about another director later on, is when you have that nice cut in 2001 between the bone and then the spaceship. Another director did that in a film 20 years earlier with a Hawk and a Spitfire. I think you probably know who I'm talking about. Yeah, Kubrick, I remember seeing 2001 on a black and white television, a very small black and white television, when I was maybe 10 or 11, and just being completely confused by it. The end, the last like 15 minutes just completely blew my mind. It still blows my mind. I mean, he has... people criticise him for being maybe cold and detached, and but I don't think that's necessarily true. Even though I do kind of wish he did AI instead of Eyes Wide Shut as his last film, but never mind. I mean, anybody who makes Doctor Strangelove deserves to be on next level. So the next one, which won't be any surprise to anybody who has watched some videos on my channel, is Krzysztof Kieślowski, who at the time of his untimely death was the greatest director in the world, in my opinion. He started off doing documentaries in Poland under communist regime. A lot of his earlier stuff was censored. He then did kind of socio-political stuff before he moved on to a more metaphysical films. He did arguably one of the top 2 or 3 greatest things that's ever been on television, Decalogue, which is based on the 10 Commandments, a 10-part TV series that is just... that might be another desert island, quite a few discs. What he managed to condense into 55-minute episodes. Some filmmakers spend a career trying to do stuff that's that good. Then he did Double Life of Veronique, which is just a beautiful riddle of a film. He then did The Three Colours, which 2 out of 3 are masterpieces. Again, I've told the story before of at Cannes, Three Colours Red was in competition with Pulp Fiction. Clint Eastwood was the chair of the committee, and Pulp Fiction won. And at the time I hadn't seen Three Colours Red, and at the time I was a bigger Tarantino fan than I was at the moment, so I was quite pleased that, you know, a kind of outsider had won at Cannes. But I remember this woman came screaming out of the audience, swearing at the panel for giving Pulp Fiction the Palme d'Or. I subsequently watched Three Colours Red, and I completely agree with the woman. There's nothing in Pulp Fiction that comes close to Three Colours Red. It is an absolute travesty that Three Colours Red didn't get the Palme d'Or. So Kieślowski had announced his retirement at Cannes after doing the Three Colours, but then he had announced he was coming out of retirement to do Heaven, Hell and Purgatory trilogy. And then unfortunately he died. Now I believe 2 out of those 3 films have been made by other people. Agnieszka Holland, I think, made one, but I haven't watched them because I don't really want to, even though they're from Kieślowski's scripts. He's next level just for the kind of depth and just power he can make from having a close-up of a sugar cube taking up coffee. Again, his critics are that he doesn't give answers. His films contain empty symbolism or things like that, but they're talking nonsense. Kieślowski was just an amazing filmmaker, despite the fact, as one of the documentaries about him says, he thought he was so-so. He was a pessimist, or in real terms that means he's a realist. Yeah, one of those. There's a kind of holy trinity in these next level directors. 3 directors that are about big questions without necessarily giving answers. But again, like I said before, life doesn't give you answers, so why should they? But they just ask the questions, and Kieślowski's one of them. You'll probably know who the other ones are, because one of them's coming up next. It's Ingmar Bergman. Obviously there's a huge box set of his work. This is the tartan DVD of The Virgin Spring. Bergman can be intimidating, I guess. There's a couple of other directors on this that aren't particularly easy watching. You have to invest something into watching their films, but that's better than in one ear and out one other, in one ear and out the other even. Bergman has made multiple masterworks, and when you consider most of his films are essentially talking heads, there's no car chases in Bergman films. That's why he's so good, that even just with people talking, again, his power of the image is wonderful. Also, the majority of his films are in black and white. Lots of them shot by Sven Nykvist, and they're absolutely beautiful. And again, Bergman's about the big questions. Yeah, and he's a shoe-in for this category of director. I'll be honest, when I do my top 25, he is probably going to be in the top 10, but he might not actually be too high in the top 10. I know that might be sacrilege, but you do have to be in a certain mood to watch Bergman films, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's plenty of filmmakers you kind of have to be in the right mood for, because your brain's going to be engaged, you're going to have to pay attention, but again, you get rewarded. And strangely enough, the next director up is the third one in my holy trinity of directors. It's Andrei Tarkovsky. This is Curzon Artificial Eye release of Stalker. Yeah, what do you say about Tarkovsky? That image in the back probably sums him up. Yeah, the first Tarkovsky film I saw, I think, was Ivan's Childhood, which is his debut, which I know for some reason people don't seem to rate as highly as his other ones, but it's a masterpiece. It's lyrical, poetic, moving, and just absolutely beautiful. Again, sadly, he died of cancer way too early. His films certainly are an investment, but what a reward you get. Again, there is a common theme with these directors. His power of the image. You know, Tarkovsky films aren't films that I've seen 20 times each, like a lot of other films. You potentially only need to see a Tarkovsky film once, and there'll be images in your brain for the rest of your life of like water and fire and architecture and isolation and loneliness and somebody walking across a dry swimming pool with a candle. There's just images like stuck in your head from Tarkovsky films. Again, he makes films about big subjects or big questions. I mean, Andrei Rublev, what makes an artist? Yeah, it's difficult for people who haven't seen Tarkovsky films. It's difficult to describe them. Ivan's Childhood is probably the best way to get into him, because it's a film that is more kind of conventional as far as narrative, and it's obviously his shortest film. Yeah, at some point I'm going to do a top 5 Tarkovsky, but it's kind of difficult to knock off 2. Well, that's not true. For me, The Sacrifice wouldn't make it into my top 5, but the trouble is which one of the other ones wouldn't. Yeah, I've actually got a picture that I found on Facebook. I think it's in Germany, and it's Tarkovsky and Kurosawa just standing in front of a shop. It's a bizarre picture, and you just wonder what a conversation was like between Tarkovsky and Kurosawa. It's a beautiful little picture, and just has many little thoughts in your mind. So that's Tarkovsky, who certainly is next level. The next director, you could argue, should be in the Holy Trinity, which would make it a Holy Quartet. It's Robert Bresson. This is the newly released Region B Blu-ray of O Hazard Balthazar, his magnificent donkey film. How do you describe Bresson? Bresson is unique, I think. Bresson takes a subject, or again one of those big questions, and he boils it down to its essence. And because he was obsessed with just getting to the truth of human behaviour, the truth of existence, his films are relatively short, because anything that's unnecessary he just doesn't bother with. Lancelot de Lac, his King Arthur story, is just unbelievable. You'll have jousting, but all you see is the joust hitting a shield, or the sound of horses, or he's just like laser focused, and anything that's extra is just thrown away. It would be fascinating to see Robert Bresson doing a Marvel film. It would probably be 12 minutes long, and you would just see Iron Man's shoe, the Hulk's eyebrow. stuff like that. O Hazard Balthazar, his donkey film, just follows the life of a donkey as it's passed from owner to owner and how it's treated. Pickpocket is just an amazing film about pickpockets, strangely enough. He did a Joan of Arc film. Again, you have to be in a certain mood for Bresson. He mostly used non-professional actors, so some of the performance might take a little bit to get used to, but he is ultimately rewarding, and he is undoubtedly next level. I mean, he's probably on a level all to himself. Robert Bresson. The next director is Louis Buñuel. This is the Criterion Blu-ray of The Exterminating Angel, which might be my favourite Buñuel, and it's one of his masterpieces. Buñuel was part surrealist, also in Chien Andalou, L'Âge d'Or, but he was about satire. Also, his film Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. Again, his targets were the Catholic Church, the middle classes, pretty much just anybody. But films like Exterminating Angel, Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, Viridiana, Milky Way. The thing with Buñuel is he's unpredictable. Phantom of Liberty is just hilarious. He's unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to get, but he always surprises. And again, he made multiple masterpieces. He made different kinds of films about different subjects, and that's why he is next level. And for some reason, he is kind of underrated, I think. And I'm not sure he's mentioned when people talk about the greatest directors of all time, and he really kind of should be. Louis Buñuel. The next one is Billy Wilder, who I recently did a top 10 of his films, and it was one of my hardest top 10s to actually whittle down to 10. Again, he made different types of films, and his films just they look great, they sound great, arguably some of the best scripts of all time, with The Apartment and Sunset Boulevard and Lost Weekend and Ace in the Hole, to name but 4. One of arguably the greatest import from Europe into the Hollywood system, even though there's a lot of competition. Billy Wilder, there's not really much more to say apart from go watch all of these films. One of the criticisms of him is he's cynical, and these films are quite dark and black. I think one critic said that Billy Wilder is so cynical that he doesn't even believe his own cynicism. But I think that's harsh. He lost family members to Auschwitz, so his films do have a dark streak as well as a funny streak, because like all the great directors, they know that life is essentially horrible, but sometimes you just need a bit of a laugh. So the next director that is next level is David Lynch. This is his latest series of Twin Peaks, which is fantastic. I did have kind of low expectations after Inland Empire, but I was actually pleasantly surprised, because with the exception of one episode, that series is pure gold. David Lynch is that rare animal who doesn't seem to be influenced by any other films. He is an artist, he believes in meditation, and he's one of the directors who you genuinely feel that he just has a muse that tells him what to do. He said that he has the music for a film before he actually writes a script. He does make decisions just based on a voice in his head, pretty much. So people who don't like him kind of say, he approaches self-parody, and he is more calculated than what he appears. But I just think he's a lovely man. He's a genuine man, and he genuinely is influenced by other forces in his head. His films are generally unpredictable, which is good because life's unpredictable. And again, he doesn't particularly give answers. But as I've said 14 times already in this video, life doesn't give you answers. So great artists shouldn't give you answers either. In an age where films explain everything to the nth degree, so there's no doubt about anything anymore, David Lynch films are refreshing when he doesn't explain everything. David Lynch. The next director is the only director that I'm going to mention his writer with. It's Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, or The Archers. This is a nice Steelbook of the Red Shoes. Michael Powell is next level because multiple masterpieces, ahead of his time along with Pressburger's scripts. He's the greatest British director of all time by a country mile. He's a visionary. He did different films. When you consider after the Second World War, British cinema was doing kitchen sink dramas and post-war dramas, Powell and Pressburger were doing The Red Shoes. They were doing musicals, they were doing filming operas, The Tales of Hoffmann. They were just so ahead of their time. Unfortunately, they weren't appreciated really in their time. They did Black Narcissus, which is about nuns in the Himalayas, and all their crew were thinking, yes, we're getting a holiday to India, and it's like, no, we're doing it in the studio, and they pull it off. Their films are just jaw-droppingly good, technically superb, just everything about them. The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which Churchill wanted to ban. One of my personal favourites is The Spy in Black, which is one of their World War II kind of propaganda films with Conrad Veidt, but it's so good that you're actually rooting for Conrad Veidt, who's the German trying to destroy the British fleet. You're actually rooting for him, and you're actually upset when his plans go awry. Yeah, Michael Powell, who then with Leo Marx did Peeping Tom, which is just a wonderful film about a sociopath, which really hurt his career because the critics just were not ready for it in 1960, even though again way ahead of its time, and with the exception of some kind of language kind of issues and currency issues, it still stands up today as one of the greatest films about a serial killer, because again you're actually you're not necessarily on his side, but you empathise with him, which again at the time you just didn't do. Killers are bad and that's it. Yeah, could talk about Powell and Pressburger all day long. Michael Powell will be quite high in my top 25. Yeah, if you haven't seen Powell and Pressburger films, just go and watch a ton of them. You won't be disappointed. Yes, they've aged a little bit, but not anywhere close to other films of their kind, and it's because of Pressburger's really smart script. Yeah, Michael Powell in brackets, Emmerich Pressburger. And the next director is again pretty unique in the sense that he is a master director in fiction films and non-fiction films. So he's kind of had two careers, and they're both mightily impressive. It's Werner Herzog. This is the Steelbook of Aguirre, Wrath of God, one of his several masterpieces. Herzog has a reputation of being slightly mad, and again he is a guy that's probably the closest to Lynch in the sense of being guided by a special voice. So he also has a famous relationship with Klaus Kinski, pointing guns at each other during filming of films, strangely enough. But then he went on, after he'd done rather a lot of fiction films and masterful fiction films, Fitzcarraldo, Nosferatu, The Vampire, Heart of Glass, just various other things. And his films were almost shot like documentary, so I guess it wasn't that much of a surprise that he would then go into documentary filmmaking, and he's made some quite sensational documentary films. Grizzly Man comes to mind. So it's almost as if he can turn his hand to anything he likes. Even acting. The only reason I have Jack Reacher, the Tom Cruise film, on Blu-ray is because of Werner Herzog, who plays the baddie in it, and he plays it very well. Just don't ask him why he doesn't have thumbs. Yeah, Werner Herzog. I think I need to probably do a series on Werner Herzog, going through all of his work, because he is definitely next level. The next guy, again, didn't make that many films. Sergio Leone. Now, he didn't make that many films. You could argue, out of the films he did make, he only made 2 or 3 masterpieces. But I think it's because I love those films so much. Once Upon a Time in the West, and The Good, the Bad and the Ugly are probably would be in my top 10 films of all time. Once Upon a Time in the West is arguably in the running for my favourite film of all time. It's just about perfect, and it's a lesson for people like Tarantino that you can actually make a 165-minute film feel like an hour and a half, unlike making a 165 film feel like 300 minutes. Again, shot compositions, his use of music, obviously his relationship with Ennio Morricone, the greatest film composer of all time, and the greatest composer of the 20th century. His influence, I mean, he pretty much started the spaghetti western phenomenon. Once Upon a Time in America, while flawed, is just such an impressive work. He always wanted to do Stalingrad, but never got the project off the ground before his death, sadly, because that would have been something to see. Sergio Leone, people might disagree whether he's next level, but he's just one of my favourite filmmakers of all time. His attitude, his love of cinema. I mean, Once Upon a Time in the West is essentially a best of westerns. He and Argento and Bertolucci all spent a summer in a villa watching westerns, watching High Noon and Shane and etc, etc. But instead of other people who love films and then make a film, Leone then made Once Upon a Time in the West, which is better than all of the films that it's influenced by. So it has influences as nods to High Noon, but it's better than High Noon. It has nods to Shane, but it's better than Shane. It's one thing to make a film that is influenced by other films, but to make it better than those films that it was influenced by is quite an achievement, and that's what Sergio Leone did, because he's next level. Now, the last next level director people might disagree with, but there is a point to it, honest. It's Satyajit Ray, who made the Apu trilogy and several others. The greatest Indian director of all time. When people say India, they just automatically assume Bollywood. But Satyajit Ray, in simplistic terms, you could say he's the Indian Renoir, or he's such a wonderfully naturalistic, humanistic director. His films are deceptively simple, but they are so human, and again just get down to human nature so effortlessly you don't realise what's actually going on, and then you're just swept along with it. The first film I saw was Pather Panchali, which is just a stunning debut and would be in the top 10 debuts of all time. And then I saw Days and Nights in the Forest, which isn't even available on DVD, which is a travesty, let alone Blu-ray, which is about four friends who just got into the country for a long weekend, and the hijinks they got up to. He did The Music Room, which is just a wonderful film about decay and passage of time. Did Charulata, Lonely Wife, which is just a wonderful film as well. And the reason that I've included Satyajit Ray in Next Level is I'm planning to do a series of films on his career. So I'm just going to go through the films that I have. I don't have a lot of them, but I do have a fair number. There's a few I haven't actually seen myself, so I'm going to go through them and just do a series of films on Satyajit Ray, because I don't think he gets enough love or exposure. And after that, I'm probably going to do the same with Werner Herzog. So thanks very much for watching this director series. I apologise because reading your comments, I then realised of the people that I've forgotten or the people that I should have included. But again, it's personal taste, and I'm always excited to read people's comments about what their directors would be in this, in whatever group I'm talking about. So thank you very much for watching this 7-part series. I apologise if it's been a bit of a mess and a bit of a slog, but I shall be starting my Satyajit Ray series hopefully next week, and thanks very much for watching. This is Sol Chiron saying enjoy your weekend.